talking about this evening is how to make astral projection a lot easier. And the book we've put together concentrates on the various technicalities that make it work and the things you need to do that gives you good access to the astral world and the many things that come with that. But the reason why I want to focus on making astral projection work is that so many of you wanted to have more control over the creative powers that are driving the lives you're living. And by seeing the world that you're experiencing from an astral perspective and managing to look down on it and see the creative energies that are driving the lives you're having, you'll then be able to make adjustments to it and put in some new entertaining inputs. Now, with astral projection, one way of describing this is a bit like something I saw one day near Bournemouth Beach. There was a little bay just near the main seafront area, and on it, on a windy day, was a windsurfer who was going up and down the little bay. He had like a little parachute above him. He was on a kind of large skateboard thing, and up and down the bay he was going at high speed with his windsurfing kit. And it was wonderful to watch, but scattered around him were literally about 20 other people with all the same kit. They'd got their little surfboards and they got their parachutes to hold on to, and they were all standing there stuck in about 3 feet of water going nowhere in a hurry, and every time they tried to get it up and running they found it extremely difficult. Maybe some of them got going for a moment or two, but most of them didn't. So it was rather along the lines of, you know, if someone from that surfing supply shop nearby in Bournemouth had got a little representative to go down to the beach and prove to everyone that this was easy and it could be done, that would produce great sales, and then you'd have lots of people trying to do it themselves. So with astral projection, there's a lot of similarity to this. Many people have had experiences of going slightly out of body, often bumping into lucid dream worlds, but it can be rather unreliable. Other people have tried to do this by taking various substances which can knock you out of body, and again you can get experiences, sometimes ones of beautiful unconditional love being poured into your body, or you can get lost. But again, there's lots of unreliability to it. And with astral projection, there are a few ways of doing it in a more reliable way. I'm going to talk this evening about some of the lighter ways of doing it, and I should also make mention, for some of you who don't know him, down there at the very end, if you can look that way, the guy holding a water bottle, that's Mr. Todd Akamasis, and he also looks after doing astral projection with various techniques such as using sound with gongs and special light effects. So if you want to bend his ear on the subject as well, feel free to. That's Mr. Todd Akamasis there. So let's get back to what we're going to talk about tonight. There's really 3 things you need to focus on to get your astral projection skills running really well. Number 1 is check that you're breathing well. Number 2 is check that you've got a nice energetic awareness of the energies flowing through your body. And number 3 is teamwork. You're not doing this on your own. In fact, if you're doing this with teamwork of various guiding spirits and other helpful beings who will assist you, it suddenly goes from being difficult and unreliable to quite easy. So I'm going to talk through all of these subjects, and I'm going to keep referring back to those 3 things, and hopefully by the end of this evening, whatever way you're trying to do astral projection, you'll have incorporated those 3 aspects, and it'll make it a lot easier for you to do. So starting off with actually what astral projection is, it's really a kind of legacy term that's left over from the idea that you are here and you are trying to push yourself out. Now, as we've got nicely on the book here, there we go, showing the product to make sure everyone knows which it is, we're trying to say you're not really here on Earth to begin with. when you're doing astral projection exercises, if anything, you're returning home, because it's more like you've pushed your consciousness into the earth level, but the earth level is not fundamentally where you live. And this legacy term of astral projection is something we have to work with. It's like something that we're familiar with, rather like the expression of going on the high street to Carphone Warehouse, even though when you go to Carphone Warehouse there aren't actually any car phones anymore to buy there. It's something we're left over with, but at least everyone knows what it means. So to begin with astral projection, you're essentially talking about moving this sort of spirit body that you are away from the physical. This is a natural function of sleep, and if you can manage to partially fall asleep but stay a little bit awake, you will find you tend to drift out of body. Sometimes you float around your bedroom, other times you end up in a kind of lucid dream world where if you decide you want to fly or pass through walls and do things like that, indeed you can. And that's really where this term came from. It was the idea you could project yourself out. So this evening I want to introduce for many people a different conceptual way of understanding it, and this is the whole idea of focusing machines. I'll repeat that again, a focusing machine. Your physical body is a focusing machine that holds you in place. So for example, you can see through your eyes, and they allow you to experience the physical world. They allow you to physically touch things. You're experiencing a focusing machine that's holding you here. Now, your physical body is based on the design of a spirit body you have. So if you float out of body, you will see the spirit version of yourself floating around. You can probably be dressed in the same outfit. Or if it's a bit embarrassing to be caught naked, you could put some clothes on and make sure you're dressed in the same outfit. But that spirit body, the one that looks like you, is a focusing machine as well. It's a spirit focusing machine, and it overlaps with the physical one. When you look into this subject of focusing machines, what you then start to discover is there are many, many different focusing machines out there. For example, what you'd call a guiding spirit is also classified as a focusing machine. Sometimes when you're out in the astral world, you get to see some of the lower spirit forms around. They too are little focusing machines in their own right. All these focusing machines are helping contribute to what you are. And if you start to see it that way, that there's a series of focusing machines which can combine and overlap, it takes a new view on how astral projection is working. And I'll go into now why that is. Different focusing machines have different levels at which they seem to operate. For example, guiding spirits as focusing machines are able to focus themselves very high up in the astral world. That's where they live. They don't easily reach this sort of level. For a guiding spirit type of being to reach this sort of level, it often needs to borrow a few little lower spirit forms and say, help me out please mate, I'd like to show up down there, I'd like to show up as looking a nice North American Indian or a angelic looking being, and I'd like to come down to that level. So they would borrow lower spirit forms to look more physical. So if for example you're doing something mediumistic, always remember that whatever kind of spirit form you're looking at is some form of focusing machine that focuses consciousness. In the same way that you're experiencing a very heavy focusing machine that is focusing consciousness behind your eyes right now and allowing you to hear stuff physically. So going with this focusing machine system, there's different kind of weights and different categories of focusing machines. As I said, the physical one here, the lower spiritual focusing machines, higher spiritual focusing machines. If you're trying astral projection as a permutation of sleep, what you're attempting to do is take your lower level focusing machine and getting it to fly really high. But it doesn't do that very well. And I myself have experienced, and the people I work with have also experienced, they often find this low-level focusing machine hits a kind of ceiling. It can often be like finding yourself in a lucid dream world, and you can float up into the clouds, but you're hitting a sort of whiteness and you're not really going any further. That heavy focusing machine doesn't take you any further at all. So to get higher in the astral world, the trick is to leave a lot of the heavy focusing machines behind and down near the earth level, because characters like your guiding spirits and other higher beings can act as a focusing machine for you. What they enable you to do is see the higher astral world and using their perspective. So instead of you trying to push yourself out, if you can quieten the focusing machine you're in and put it into a nice state, then you can start to pick up what these higher level focusing machines can already see, what these higher level focusing machines can already pick up on. And to go on to another concept, I'm not sure there's a book here somewhere, yeah, one copy hiding behind me. When we were doing a lot of astral exploration, this book was nearly ready to go a few years ago, and then we bumped into some more alien-looking characters who had a few things to say about how astral projection is done, and they caused such an upgrade in what was understood that this didn't get written for many years because it had to be completely redone. We had to redo the whole of the Great Simulator Part 3 to take account of what had been learnt and what had been shown to us. And reaching other beings on other worlds, again, was a focusing machine exercise, leaving the heavy focusing machine here, connecting into guiding spirit focusing machines, and then borrowing literally the bodies, be they spirit or physical, of beings on other worlds. So it's like going up and then dropping back down into the bodies of other beings. So the experience was one of becoming other beings, sometimes human-like and sometimes quite alien, with different breathing systems or different ways of operating. So get this concept now, we've got it. We're moving between focusing machines. And here's where I was talking about the three elements. If you want to get your body able to switch from being in this focusing machine to other focusing machines, you've got to start off by getting its energy system breathing well. That involves breathing through your diaphragm, not in your chest. A lot of people are breathing with a chest breathing like that, very much in their chest, and they breathe quite rapidly. It's almost an emergency backup system of when you're not breathing properly that you end up breathing in your chest. It means you don't die. What you need to be doing is breathing using the diaphragm, and to achieve that you've got to get your physical body in a very nice relaxed state. You've got to get it breathing down to the ground. And when you do it that way, you're breathing a lot more air, and the air is in itself a living organism. If you can start to feel the energies of that, that means you're breathing in a better way. If you're breathing deeply and you're looking quite miserable, not breathing sufficiently well yet. What we need to be doing is breathing in a way that you start to feel happier. Because if your body's in a happy, relaxed state, that means that your body is more comfortable with letting your consciousness go on some journeys elsewhere. Now, just repeat this again because it's so important. You've got to get the body breathing well, using the diaphragm, and when it's breathing well like that, you'll find it can start to take on happier energies. When you do this, you then become more energetically aware. And I'll just emphasize this. If you're trying to do astral projection exercises and you're not starting to feel the aura energies around you, you're not getting a sense that you're a much bigger being, you're not hitting the wavelengths where this is going to happen. You're really trapped down in that low-level focusing machine. So you've got to be breathing in a way that you start to feel the energies around you. You start to feel how you're this bigger being and you're feeling a happier energy. And then we come to the third element of this, which is the teamwork. And to give you a sort of background to this, the way we're set up, our lower level focusing machines are largely designed to keep us down at this dimension where we're experiencing the earthly world. That's the job they do. They do it very efficiently and they hold you in place. And in many ways, when you're using your mind that's thinking in terms of earthly stuff to try and do astral projection work, it's really, really bad at it. In many ways, you should say it shouldn't touch the controls because its intention is to keep you quite well grounded. Also, not grounded, but earthbound. So teamwork is what you need to get you out of there, because you have a kind of built-in autopilot system into the greater being of what you are that can help you do this. To give you a little comparison, if you go on YouTube, there's a wonderful video you can watch by a guy calling himself the Pilot Mentor channel, and he explains things about aviation. And one day he made a little half-hour video on how it was possible to land something that looks like a Ryanair jet on your own if all the pilots were dead. And the key thing to this operation was, could you get into that cockpit and get the radio working? And if you could get the radio working and your communications up and running, that plane had such a good autopilot system, provided someone could give you a few tips on how to set the autopilot, it could actually land itself at your destination airport, and you could walk away being the hero who just landed a 737 plane, merely by knowing how to get the radio working and twiddle a few things on the autopilot, and very little more. It would get you down. Now, when it comes to astral projection work, we've got a similar situation in that a lot of our body, a lot of what we're thinking is getting in the way. And if we can let some sort of autopilot arrangement help us out, then that makes it a lot easier. So quite literally, if you can keep your hands off the controls, and that was something that was described in this flying video, the pilot explained, he said, do not touch the controls. It'll knock off the autopilot. You take control of the aircraft yourself too much, and then you'll really have to start flying and you'll probably make a mess of the whole thing. So I'll explain this third element about teamwork that makes this really easy. Everyone here who wants to learn astral projection is turning themselves into what, from the perspective of higher worlds, is seen as an interactive. It's like a being on Earth who wants to interact with other worlds. And what they would like you to do is give them a way of coming into this world. On higher worlds, beings there think of things like astral projection and all the spiritual stuff as completely second nature. It's something kids can do. Here on this world, it's something that adults might learn how to do in this lifetime, but hopefully the children we'd give birth to over the years will learn themselves and be able to do it. Now look at this way. The team of beings who you might bump into out there probably know how to do astral projection a lot better than your mind would know how to do it. So when we're teaching people to do astral projection easily, we're getting them to breathe really well, so they're getting enough air in, they're breathing the living air in, they're allowing themselves to become energetically aware of what they're up to, so you feel your aura getting bigger, and then you also pay attention to how you've got this team, at first a little bit invisibly, but nevertheless there helping you out. And instead of you trying to sort out your energy system, you start to let them sort out your energy system. And when people have practiced this, they find that quite literally their whole bodies are getting much more energized. You're starting to get a very connected feel. You feel as if there's a column of light coming through your head. It's almost as if you're getting stretched upwards. And that's because you're letting beings who know what they're up to do it for you. And when you're doing that, it makes it a lot easier. What they then try and do with you is get you up out of the lower level worlds where you'd think you're a human and lift you up into higher level worlds where you can start to see your guiding spirits for what they are. And one of the first challenges you run into is the annoying characters tend to move rather a lot. Down here, I'm relatively static, but when you're looking at guiding spirits and the natural energy forms, they're wonderfully moving. They're like swirling beings, and they're changing colour quite a lot. And to begin with, it's almost hard for the human mind to keep track of this one. But nevertheless, your guiding spirits can actually show you how this is done. With guiding spirits as well, they're not just limited to swirling colours of energies, but you will find that every one of you has friends living on other more advanced worlds. Because what's gone on is you've decided to come here to this earth to go and live out a life in a very low dimension world and then seeing if you can snap out of it. That's why you're drawn to this sort of work. That's why these sorts of esoteric books are of such great interest, because you've got that desire to snap out of it. Not everyone wants to do that. There are many beings who've come to this world and they were so focused on getting down to the low dimension that they forget that they want to snap out of it. So you are in the relative minority about this. Anyway, on other worlds, you will find you have friends there who are living in more comfortable environments, worlds where people don't use money because everyone likes to work. So the whole system works extremely well. Everyone likes doing their jobs. Farmers like making food. People who look after engineering and building stuff like doing their work. The whole system runs because people enjoy working. But the downside of some of it is that it can be a bit dull. And when it gets a little bit dull, the effect of that is people say, where can we go? And it then turns out that all these other worlds are really imagined, and the world we're in is really an imagined world too. When you bump into beings on other worlds, they're often reminding you that this world we're experiencing right now is in so many ways an imagined world. It's a simulation of what this place would be like if it were actually real. But it's not. It's being created. It's created in multiple versions. There are parallel versions of this earth. And you can sometimes swap between them if you want. You can move around and have a look at them using your astral skills. So to get back to it, you can visit friends on other worlds. They can see you've gone down to this low dimension world. You're probably feeling a bit lost. You'll have forgotten lots of stuff. You won't easily remember where you came from or how you got here. And your friends on the other world reckon it takes a bit of teamwork to help you out. And again, they will try and stabilize your system. They will try and help your energy system go in a happy, flowing, how really you don't need to know an awful lot, but just stick to the basics, stick to the breathing, feel yourself grounding, feel yourself connecting with nature. Be energetically aware. If you're not feeling energetically aware, it means your vibration's too low and you're probably not going to go anywhere. So if you are feeling energetically aware, that's a good sign. That means you're on the right track. Everything's working. You should get a sense of these friends around you. With a little bit of practice, they'll try and synchronize you. So for example, if you're synchronizing with another being on a high dimension world who nevertheless has a human-like body, and there are many worlds like that, you'd find they'll try to get you to synchronize with their breathing. And you'll often notice how much slower they're breathing compared to the speed at which you're breathing. And they'll try and synchronize you and get you to sense how happy they are, what it's like to be that other being. And as you experience that, you'll settle into that better energy flow. And this is the beauty of how this works. By simply letting yourself synchronize with beings who know how to make astral projection work, it becomes easy to do. All that difficulty of bashing around your bedroom and getting lost gets wiped away because you're letting beings who know how to do it take over for you. So then, what else can we do when we've actually got this astral projection up and running? Why go and visit other worlds? Why look into that? And there are some very simple, obvious reasons for this. And that is, on this world, I'm sure you've all noticed, in many ways, it's a relatively primitive place, where being a lying politician seems to have become a noble quality in its own way. And we've got stuck in a situation where it's often a very greedy, over-materialistic environment where people are concerned about the way in which the planet is being damaged. Well, when you go visiting other worlds, you begin to see how things normally work. You get a first-hand experience of how other beings live when they're actually looking after their world properly. So, for example, one of the insights that came out of astral explorations was the degree to which, in many ways, our bodies, these focusing machines I was explaining earlier, are a product of nature. You might think you're some sort of being who's just dropped down on Earth and now you're walking around, but you often overlook how nature has helped put you here. And if, when you're doing your astral projection setups, you've got a good connection with nature, you'll find you're inherently in a better state. And visiting other worlds, it demonstrated a rather surprising concept that nature, like trees and plants and sort of greater planet as an organism, it wanted to see the heavens rather better. It wanted to have a look at what it really was, what was creating all of this. It wanted to see its own superconsciousness or God. And to help itself do that, it decided to, let's see if we can help knock up some human forms, because we are like little telescopes. We can look up and connect to that higher energy, that higher being that we really are, extremely well. And you can look up and see it, and then it turns out there's only one of us, even though on a night like this evening it seems like there's many people crowded into a room. You'll find there's just the one being up there. So nature spirits wanted to get a better look at this, and they helped create us. And this produces a rather sort of strange effect, that if in your locality you connect very well to the trees and plants and other nature things, you'll find you get a very good connect. But if you go to other localities, so you go on holiday, you can sometimes find it's a little bit strange. It's as if suddenly you've got a less good connect with the local nature, because the local nature hasn't helped create a sort of spirit version of you over there. You're like a visitor to it. If you're a little bit telepathic, you can often say hello to trees normally, but if you go on holiday and you haven't made a link with the local nature, it's as if they don't talk to you as much. It's like the trees are being a little bit standoffish and not very friendly. So one of the examples of letting the team help you out and get this all to work was, I found myself on just such an experience away from home, and one of the beings I work with said, I'll fix it for you. I'll get this connection to work for you. I'll give you a better connect. And then all of a sudden, it's as if every plant and bush was suddenly saying hello, because they loved connecting through me. And I'll give you an example of what this is like. When I walk to work, I often see many trees and things in nature. And as I'm walking past them, they often like to have a look at the heavens, and it looks a sort of purple colour through their eyes. And then when I went on the last holiday trip I was on, I noticed on that island, when I was looking through, via nature there, and it was helping looking through me, it saw it in a sort of slightly red colour of the spectrum. When I got home after the holiday, I was out walking to work on the first morning, said hello to the trees, and the first trees there were very pleased to see me, and I saw that sort of purple colour again I was used to. And almost immediately I got a little call from the holiday island saying, what about us? Where are we? We want to be involved in this. And at that moment it was like seeing a sort of mixing of the two streams of energies, because we were connected into the system, and I'd been letting the beings who actually help all of this work do their job and set up the necessary links. So I'll emphasize again, the three things are breathing, make sure you are breathing well, breathing with a smile. If you're breathing in a miserable, grumpy way, then observe it, because that's not going to get you where you need to go. You need to be breathing in a happy way. Check you can feel that energy awareness, that expanded aura, and then finally make sure you're doing teamwork. And if you think I'm being a bit repetitive about this, do realise that there's a load of lower spirit forms knocking around who are there trying to erase your memory of how this is done. You're all beings who've come here from more advanced worlds. We've all had our memories partially erased, and the effect is we can't remember how to do this. Sometimes even if we've got a book in front of us explaining it, we'll keep forgetting things. So that's why you need to keep track of those very three basic things, and if you look out for them, you will be able to do astral projection much more easily.
Overlap does astral projection have with lucid dreaming?
A good way to describe it, we are in effect having a rather powerful dream. And one of my clients one day had been to see some sort of hypnotherapist who got him experiencing very far out of body, and he commented when he was out of body in a way, he said it was like he'd been dreaming he'd been a human. So this was a strange dream he'd been having, and he saw it that way. So yes, what we are trying to do is become conscious within the dream, within the illusory experience. We are aiming to do that, and it's quite a challenge, and it's one where you'll keep falling to sleep in the middle of it. I hope that answers that. If you explain a bit more, what's going on is there are many astral levels. Some of the first astral levels you bump into are often described as lucid dream worlds, where it appears very similar to the Earth you're already on, but often a few variations. And in these ones, you normally appear to be a human, but have the ability to start warping the environment you're in. So a good example is if you're in a lucid dream and you realize you're there, you can probably start flying. If you want to get to meet some guiding spirits in a lucid dream, that can be done. Usually a bit of persistence does the trick, and you'll find you've got to get about as high as you can, and they'll often come down to about as low as they can get, and you can meet in the middle. They can have strange disturbances. And I'd give you an example. When I was doing that one night, doing a sort of lucid dream approach, it's like I had a link with the astral projection team. It was about 4 or 5 a.m. I woke up full of sexual energy, literally grabbed the wife to unload that on her, and being a wife she had to sort of go along with the whole thing and before she get back to sleep, which then left me very nicely happy, but in a state where I was sort of half awake, half asleep, perfect for getting into this sort of lucid dream world. And then over the course of 3 attempts, it got this to work. First attempt I tried and just got lost. Second attempt found myself in a sort of lucid dream world, testing I could step off buildings, not fall to the ground. I was thinking to myself, you wouldn't want to be trying this if you're on drugs, because you might make a mistake and step off the building and have a bit of an accident. So yeah, I could fly, but couldn't get too high. Woke up, did a 3rd attempt, and finally bumped into a place where some guiding spirits were showing up, and one of them was literally trying to say hello to me. And it was rather like having, there's a guiding spirit, and he was sort of coming over towards me and almost joining at the hip. And I have to say, it was painful. It was like I was going, stop, you're hurting my testicles on an astral level doing that. Please don't knock me about. So you can do these things and get it all to work. And yeah, lucid dream worlds is that sort of lower level. With getting used to that, you can get beyond it. You're talking about how is this world, and then there's the astral world, and we're seeing the astral world as fundamentally something separate, and you're also asking what's remote viewing got to do with it. Well, if we start off with the remote viewing, if you're doing that in this world, you're taking some of your spirit body and you're focusing it at another location to try and pick up what's there. And on these occasions, you're often using the lower spirit components of what you are to try and focus enough consciousness to start picking other things up. And if you're doing it quite nicely, you'll get impressions about that world. You're often actually seeing it from an astral perspective, and you may not be seeing the actual physicality of it. So when you're doing remote viewing, if you're looking for the energies driving someone, so as Hari here, you'd be seeing more an energy version of him, which would bear a lot of similarities to the physical one in many cases. And if you get really low, maybe you catch him physically. So that's sort of remote viewing. It's a product of just moving the focusing machine elsewhere, or using a focusing machine elsewhere. As regards the concept of what world you're in, this is the back-to-front notion we have to try and step out of. We often see it as this world, and then there's this other astral place. It's much better to get it the right way round and say that there's a whole other place out there, and this world is an extension of it. It's rather like we will say with alien beings. It's like there's humans and everyone else is an alien, like the entire universe of beings are all aliens. But it's much better to say they're different species, different types around, and this is a relatively small, compacted world, and also existing, again, mentioned in multiple dimensions. So you can find different dimensional versions of it, and you can also find parallel versions of it. So if you ever wonder, was there a version of you who is having a happier, richer life, do use your astral skills to go and look in, and you'll probably find one.
Can you recommend any exercises for grounding yourself?
Sorry?
For grounding yourself.
The best way to stay grounded is to enjoy your nature connection and be open to the idea of physical work. So, for example, if you'd look at a lot of Eastern monasteries where there are people there who are doing lots of very esoteric skills, you'll often see that they also do things like a bit of gardening, a bit of sweeping up their courtyard. They do physical work. And if you do physical things like that, it actually helps your astral skills. So to give you sort of one example, one client I ran into recently in another country, so I'd Skype with him, he was so high and bright, it's very easy to show him astral skills, but most of the work was teaching him how to ground enough to get that higher energy flow coming back down to the ground. So I hope that answers. And again, one of the things we learned from sort of traveling out there to understand it, we are a product of nature, and the local nature around you is working through you, and when you're very connected to it, it's helping the energies flow through you. So if you move away from your local nature, it gets less of a good connection. You can still connect, but it gets less good. And then if you borrow on your travel destination some local nature there, you can do it, but you have to build up the connection with the local nature to get the energy flow. And as you said, if you're following those 3 tips, tip number 3 was try to keep your hands off the controls as much as possible. This should be easy if you're doing it well. Let your team assist you, and they can make a nice local connect with the nature, who'll be delighted to have an amazing being such as you to work through, and then you'll find it all starts working again really well.
So it doesn't matter that I was born in Australia.
What's that?
Even though I was born in Australia, that's not my local nature?
Well, if you're doing work with your team who you've presumably at that point built up a confident relationship with, they're not going to drop you down a dark hole somewhere. They'll be looking after you. You're there interactive. They want to keep you alive and functioning well. They know what they're up to. So I think with that we're done for tonight, and thank you everyone for braving coronavirus.